The champagne bubbles tickled my nose as I raised the flute to Sarah, my bride, my wife of mere hours. The grand ballroom of the Majestic Hotel buzzed with the joyous chatter of our families and friends, a symphony of well-wishes and celebratory laughter. Sarah's smile, usually so radiant it could chase away the darkest clouds, seemed a touch strained as she clinked her glass against mine. I chalked it up to the sheer exhaustion that comes with orchestrating a wedding of this scale. Every detail, from the cascading floral arrangements to the meticulously curated playlist, had been Sarah's vision, brought to life with painstaking precision. I had mostly played the supportive groom, offering opinions when prompted and signing the endless stream of checks. It was her day after all, our day, and I wanted nothing more than to see her happy. But as the evening wore on, a subtle unease began to settle in the pit of my stomach, a disquieting feeling that I couldn't quite place. It started with the way Sarah's eyes kept flicking towards David, my best man, her childhood friend. They had a long history, that much I knew, and I had always been comfortable with their closeness. David was like a brother to me, a loyal confidant who had stood by me through thick and thin. But tonight, there was a different kind of energy between them. A silent language spoken through fleeting glances and hushed whispers in the corners of the room. I watched as David leaned in to say something to Sarah, his hand lingering a fraction too long on her arm. Her reaction was almost imperceptible, a slight tightening of her jaw, a brief flicker of something unreadable in her eyes before she plastered on a bright, almost artificial smile. Maybe I was just being paranoid, fueled by pre-wedding jitters that had somehow lingered longer than they should have. The pressure of the day, the weight of expectation. It could make anyone see shadows where there were none. I tried to shake off the feeling, focusing on the congratulatory hugs and enthusiastic toasts. My father's speech was particularly moving, a heartfelt recounting of my childhood and his hopes for my future with Sarah. I glanced at her, expecting to see tears in her eyes, but she was looking towards the bar, her gaze fixed on David, who was engaged in an animated conversation with my cousin Emily. When he caught her eye, he offered a quick, almost apologetic smile, and Sarah immediately looked away, her cheeks flushed. The unease intensified, morphing into a knot of anxiety in my chest. I started paying closer attention, my eyes darting between Sarah and David, trying to decipher their interactions. They seemed to avoid being in the same place at the same time, yet their awareness of each other was palpable, a magnetic pull that they were both trying to resist. During the first dance, as I held Sarah close, her body felt stiff, her eyes distant. When I whispered how beautiful she looked, her response was a perfunctory, "Thank you," her gaze drifting over my shoulder towards where David was standing near the edge of the dance floor, watching us with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Later, as the DJ cranked up the music and the dance floor filled with energetic guests, I saw Sarah and David slip out onto the terrace. The French doors were slightly ajar, and I could hear the muffled sound of their voices. I told myself it was nothing, just two old friends catching up, but the nagging feeling persisted. I excused myself from a conversation with my aunt and casually strolled towards the terrace doors, my heart pounding in my chest. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the cool metal of the handle. What if I was wrong? What if I was just letting my insecurities get the better of me? But the thought of not knowing, of letting this gnawing suspicion fester, was unbearable. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the cool night air. The terrace was dimly lit by string lights, casting long, dancing shadows across the stone floor. Sarah and David were standing near the railing, their backs to me. I could hear the low murmur of their voices but couldn't make out the words. As I took a step closer, David turned, his eyes widening in what looked like a mixture of surprise and alarm. Sarah's back was still to me, and she didn't seem to have noticed my presence. "Michael, hey man," David said, his voice a little too loud, a little too cheerful. "Just catching some air with Sarah." Sarah turned around, her eyes widening as well. Her smile looked forced, almost brittle. "Hey honey, just talking about the weather." The weather? It was a perfectly clear night, the stars twinkling brightly overhead. It felt like a pathetic lie, and the realization hit me like a physical blow. My heart sank, the knot in my chest tightening to the point of pain. "The weather," I repeated, my voice sounding flat even to my own ears. I looked from Sarah to David and back again. The air between them felt thick with unspoken words, with a tension that was almost palpable. "Yeah, you know. How nice it is," David stammered, avoiding my gaze. Sarah stepped forward, placing a hand on my arm. Her touch felt cold, unfamiliar. "We were just saying how smoothly everything went today. Thanks to all your hard work, honey." Her words felt hollow, rehearsed. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then up into her eyes. I searched for the love, the joy, the excitement that I had seen there just hours ago as she walked down the aisle towards me. But all I saw was a carefully constructed facade, a wall built to conceal something she didn't want me to see. "Is that all?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. They both nodded, their eyes darting nervously between each other and me. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant sounds of the party inside. The cool night air suddenly felt heavy, suffocating. "I think I'll head back in," I said, turning towards the French doors. "You two enjoy the weather." I walked back into the ballroom, the festive atmosphere now feeling alien and mocking. The laughter and music seemed to amplify the turmoil inside me. I felt like an outsider, a spectator in my own wedding reception. I wandered through the crowd, accepting polite congratulations with a forced smile, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what I had just witnessed. Could I be wrong? Was I just overreacting? Maybe they were just old friends, sharing a private moment. But the way they had reacted, the awkwardness, the blatant lie about the weather, it all pointed to something more. Something I didn't want to believe. I found myself gravitating towards the bar, ordering a double scotch. I needed something to numb the pain, to quiet the raging storm of emotions inside me. As I took a large gulp of the amber liquid, my eyes scanned the room, searching for Sarah. I saw her talking to my mother, her smile now looking more genuine. Maybe I had jumped to conclusions. Maybe I should just let it go and try to enjoy the rest of our wedding night. But then I saw it. Across the room, near the dessert table, David was talking to a group of our friends. He laughed at something someone said, and then his eyes met Sarah's, who was still talking to my mother. For a fleeting moment, their eyes locked, and in that brief exchange, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. It wasn't just friendship. It wasn't just polite acknowledgement. It was something deeper, something intimate, something that spoke of a connection that went far beyond what I was comfortable with. There was a spark, a flicker of understanding, a shared secret. That was it. In that single, unguarded moment, my doubts solidified into certainty. My wife, on our wedding day, was having an affair with my best man. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the breath out of me. The scotch in my hand trembled, and I had to set it down quickly before I spilled it. The joy of the day evaporated, replaced by a bitter taste of betrayal. The love I felt for Sarah just hours ago, so pure and unwavering, now felt tainted, poisoned by this sudden, devastating revelation. And the trust I had placed in David, my closest friend, shattered into a million pieces. A wave of nausea washed over me and I stumbled away from the bar, needing to get out of the crowded ballroom to find some air, some space to process what I had just learned. I made my way towards the back exit, my mind reeling, my heart aching. As I stepped out into the quiet darkness of the hotel parking lot, a single thought began to form in my mind. A dark and dangerous thought that would ultimately change everything. She cheated on me on our wedding day, but I would do something worse. The cool night air did little to quell the burning rage that had begun to simmer inside me. I paced back and forth in the deserted parking lot, my mind a whirlwind of disbelief, anger, and hurt. How could they do this to me? On our wedding day? The day that was supposed to be the happiest of our lives? The ultimate symbol of our love and commitment? They had turned it into a cruel mockery, a stage for their deceit. Every memory of the day, every loving glance, every shared smile, now felt like a lie, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to fool me. The vows we had exchanged just hours ago echoed in my ears, now sounding hollow and meaningless. To have and to hold from this day forward. What a joke. I thought back to the months leading up to the wedding, the countless hours we had spent planning every detail, the excitement we had shared as we envisioned our future together. Had it all been a lie? Had Sarah been secretly seeing David all along while pretending to be my loving fiancé? And David, my best friend, the man I had trusted implicitly, how could he betray me in such a despicable way? The more I thought about it, the more certain I became that this wasn't just a fleeting moment of weakness on their part. The way they had looked at each other, the unspoken understanding between them, it suggested a deeper connection, a history that I had been completely oblivious to. Had their affair started before we even got engaged? Had I been living a lie for months, perhaps even years? The questions swirled in my mind, each one more painful than the last. I felt like a fool, a naive idiot who had been completely blind to what was going on right under his nose. How could I have been so stupid? How could I have missed the signs? A wave of self-pity washed over me, quickly followed by a surge of anger. They thought they could get away with this. They thought they could humiliate me in front of all our family and friends, and I would just stand by and take it? No, I wouldn't let them. I wouldn't be a victim. The dark thought that had first flickered in my mind began to take shape, solidifying into a plan. It was rash, it was impulsive, it was probably insane. But in that moment, fueled by rage and a desperate need for revenge, it felt like the only logical response. They wanted to betray me on our wedding day? Fine. I would give them a wedding day they would never forget. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. It belonged to a woman named Chloe, someone I had met a few months ago at a work conference. We had exchanged numbers and a few flirtatious messages, but nothing had ever come of it. Until now. My fingers trembled as I pressed the call button. The phone rang a few times before she answered. Hello, her voice was sleepy. Chloe, it's Michael. There was a brief pause. Michael, from the conference. Wow, this is unexpected. Listen, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I need a favor. A favor? What kind of favor? I took a deep breath and plunged in. I need you to come to my wedding reception. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Your wedding reception? Tonight? Yes, it's happening right now at the Majestic Hotel downtown. But I don't understand. Why would you want me to come to your wedding? Because, I said, my voice low and dangerous, I need you to pretend to be my girlfriend. Another long silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. Pretend to be your girlfriend? At your own wedding? Yes. My wife? Well, I just found out she's been having an affair with my best man. I need to... I need to show her what it feels like. I could hear her gasp softly. Oh my God, Michael, I'm so sorry, that's terrible. So will you do it? Will you help me? There was a moment of hesitation. This is incredibly messed up. I know, I said, but I'm desperate. Please, Chloe, I need your help. Finally, she sighed. Okay, Michael, tell me where and when. A wave of relief washed over me, mixed with a sense of grim determination. I had set my plan in motion. It was risky, it was volatile, but I was past the point of caring about the consequences. They had drawn first blood. Now it was my turn. I gave Chloe the address of the Majestic Hotel and told her to meet me at the back entrance in about half an hour. Then, I took a few deep breaths, trying to compose myself. I knew I couldn't go back into the ballroom looking like I had just seen a ghost. I needed to put on a brave face, to act as if everything was perfectly normal. I splashed some water on my face in the nearby restroom, trying to wash away the raw emotion that was etched on my features. I straightened my tie, smoothed down my hair, and tried to force a smile. It felt unnatural, like a mask that was about to crack under pressure. As I walked back into the reception, I scanned the room for Sarah and David. They were nowhere to be seen. A fresh wave of anger washed over me. Were they still out on the terrace, continuing their clandestine rendezvous? Or had they found some other secluded corner of the hotel to carry on their affair? I spotted my parents talking to some of their friends, and I forced myself to join them, engaging in polite conversation, pretending that everything was fine. But inside, I was a boiling cauldron of rage and hurt, counting down the minutes until Chloe arrived. The next half hour felt like an eternity. I kept glancing at my watch, my anxiety growing with each passing minute. What if Chloe changed her mind? What if she didn't show up? What if my plan completely backfired? Just as I was starting to lose hope, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text message from an unknown number. I'm here. Back entrance. My heart leaped. It was Chloe. I excused myself from my parents, telling them I needed to step outside for a moment. I made my way to the back entrance, my hands clammy with anticipation. As I opened the door, I saw her standing there, leaning against the wall. She was even more beautiful than I remembered. She had long, dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and a confident, almost mischievous smile. She was wearing a sleek black dress that accentuated her curves, and she looked like she had just stepped out of a magazine. "Michael," she asked, her voice soft and sultry. "Chloe, thank you for coming," I said, my voice filled with a mixture of relief and nervousness. "You sounded pretty desperate," she said, raising an eyebrow. "So what's the plan?" I quickly filled her in on the situation, telling her about Sarah and David and what I wanted her to do. She listened intently, her expression shifting from surprise to sympathy to a kind of amused understanding. "So you want me to walk in there with you, arm in arm, and pretend like we're a couple?" she asked when I had finished. "Exactly," I said. "I want Sarah to see us, to know that I'm not going to sit around and be a victim. I want her to feel the same hurt and betrayal that I'm feeling right now." Chloe nodded slowly. "Okay, Michael, I'll do it. But you know this is going to cause a scene, right?" "That's the point," I said grimly. "All right then," she said, a determined glint in her eyes. "Let's go crash your wedding." We walked back into the ballroom together, my arm linked with hers. The change in my demeanor must have been noticeable because a few of my friends who were standing nearby looked at me with curiosity and concern. "Hey Michael, you okay?" one of them asked. "You look a little pale." "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just needed some fresh air. Guys, this is Chloe." I introduced Chloe to my friends, and they exchanged polite greetings, but I could see the questions in their eyes. They knew something was up. Then, I saw Sarah. She was standing across the room talking to David. Their backs were to us, and they didn't seem to have noticed our entrance. I took a deep breath and squeezed Chloe's arm. "Here we go," I whispered. We started walking towards them, making sure we were clearly visible. As we got closer, David turned around first, and his eyes widened in shock when he saw me with Chloe. He nudged Sarah, and she turned around as well. The look on her face when she saw me, arm in arm with a beautiful stranger, was priceless. Her jaw dropped, her eyes widened in disbelief, and the color drained from her face. For a moment, she just stood there, frozen, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Then her eyes met mine, and I held her gaze, letting her see the hurt and anger that I'd been trying to suppress. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt? Fear? I couldn't tell for sure. But I knew one thing. I had her attention, and I wasn't about to let it go. The silence that descended upon the immediate vicinity was thick enough to cut with a knife. Several conversations abruptly ceased as guests noticed the unfolding drama. All eyes seemed to be on Sarah, David, and me, with Chloe standing confidently by my side, a picture of composed elegance. Sarah finally broke the silence, her voice trembling slightly. "Michael? What's going on?" I met her gaze, my own expression deliberately neutral, though inside, a storm of emotions was raging. "What does it look like, Sarah?" I asked, my voice calm but with an underlying edge. "This is Chloe. She's a friend." I emphasized the last word with a pointed look at her. David shifted uncomfortably beside Sarah, his face pale. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but then seemed to think better of it. "A friend," Sarah repeated, her voice rising slightly. "Since when do you bring friends to our wedding reception without telling me?" "Well, you've been rather busy yourself, haven't you?" I retorted, my eyes flicking pointedly towards David. The implication hung heavy in the air. A few gasps rippled through the small crowd that had gathered around us. My parents, who had been chatting with some friends nearby, looked over with expressions of confusion and concern. Chloe squeezed my arm gently, a silent offering of support. I turned to her and offered a small, tight smile. "Chloe, this is Sarah, my wife. And this is David, my best man." The titles felt like sandpaper on my tongue. Chloe extended a hand to Sarah, her expression polite but cool. "Nice to meet you, Sarah. Congratulations on your wedding." Sarah stared at Chloe's outstretched hand as if it were a venomous snake. She didn't take it. "Michael, I demand to know what's going on," she said, her voice now laced with anger. "Demand?" I raised an eyebrow. That's an interesting choice of words, considering the circumstances. The tension in the room was palpable. I could feel the weight of everyone's gaze on us. I knew I was making a scene, but at this point I didn't care. They had started it. "Michael, please, let's talk about this privately," Sarah pleaded, her voice softening slightly. "Why? Afraid your little secret will get out?" I asked, the bitterness in my voice unmistakable. David finally found his voice. "Michael, man, what are you talking about?" he said, trying to sound innocent, but his eyes betrayed his nervousness. "Oh, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, David," I said, turning to face him directly. The furtive glances, the hushed whispers, the secret meetings on the terrace. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? David's face flushed crimson. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. Sarah's eyes widened in panic. "Michael, this is not the time or the place," she said frantically. "When would be a good time, Sarah? Maybe after you and David sneak off to your hotel room later tonight?" The words were out before I could stop them, fueled by pure, unadulterated rage. A collective gasp went through the room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's face was a mask of shock and disbelief. Sarah's face crumpled and tears welled up in her eyes. "How could you say that?" she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "How could you do it, Sarah?" I countered, my voice trembling slightly. On our wedding day, with my best friend. The dam had broken. The carefully constructed facade of normalcy had shattered, revealing the ugly truth beneath. The joyous atmosphere of our wedding reception had been replaced by a scene of raw emotion and public humiliation. I looked at Sarah, her face streaked with tears, and for a brief moment I felt a pang of guilt. Was I going too far? Was I making things worse? But then I remembered the look in her eyes when she had glanced at David across the room, the way they had lied to my face on the terrace. The guilt quickly vanished, replaced by a renewed sense of anger and betrayal. I saw you, Sarah, I said, my voice low and steady. I saw the way you looked at him. I saw the secret smiles. I know what's been going on. David stepped forward, placing a hand on Sarah's arm. Michael, you've got it all wrong, he said, his voice surprisingly firm. Sarah and I are just friends. Nothing else. Just friends? I scoffed. Is that what you call it? Because it looked like a lot more than friendship to me. Please, Michael, let's just talk about this, Sarah pleaded again, her voice barely a whisper. There's nothing to talk about, Sarah, I said, my voice cold and hard. I know the truth. I turned to Chloe, who had been watching the whole exchange with a mixture of concern and understanding. Chloe, thank you for your support, I said. But I think it's time for you to go. She nodded, squeezing my arm one last time. Take care, Michael, she said softly before turning and walking away. As Chloe disappeared through the crowd, I turned back to Sarah and David, my eyes filled with a mixture of pain and resolve. As for you two, I said, my voice ringing through the suddenly silent ballroom. The wedding is off. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. A collective gasp rippled through the remaining guests, their faces a mixture of shock, horror, and morbid curiosity. My parents looked as if they had been struck by lightning. Sarah stared at me, her tear-filled eyes wide with disbelief. What did you just say? She whispered, as if she hadn't quite comprehended my words. I said the wedding is off, Sarah, I repeated, my voice firm and unwavering. There's no way I can marry someone who would betray me like this, especially not on our wedding day. David's face was ashen. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. But what about everything? Sarah stammered, gesturing around the lavishly decorated ballroom. What about all the plans? What about our families? What about us, Sarah? I cut her off, my voice filled with a raw pain that I could no longer contain. What about the vows we exchanged just hours ago? Did those mean nothing to you? Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head frantically. No, Michael, they meant everything. I don't know what to say. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to betray me, I said, the bitterness in my voice cutting through the stunned silence. I turned to my parents, who were now standing beside us, their faces etched with anguish. Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I know this isn't how you imagined the day would go. My mother reached out and took my hand, her grip tight. Oh, Michael, she said, her voice choked with tears. Are you sure about this? I looked at her, then at my father, and then back at Sarah, who was now sobbing uncontrollably with David standing awkwardly beside her. Yes, Mom, I'm sure, I said, my voice filled with a resolve that surprised even myself. I can't marry her. Not after this. The reality of what was happening seemed to finally sink in for Sarah. She took a step towards me, her hands outstretched. Michael, please, just let me explain, she begged, her voice cracking with emotion. It's not what you think. Then what is it, Sarah? I asked, my voice cold and unforgiving. Tell me, I'm all ears. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes darting nervously towards David. Then she took a deep breath and began to speak, her words tumbling out in a rush. It started a few weeks ago, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. David was going through a really tough time. His relationship with Emily had just ended, and he was feeling really down. I was just trying to be a good friend, to support him. By sneaking around behind my back? I interrupted, my voice laced with sarcasm. No, it wasn't like that, she insisted, her eyes pleading with me to believe her. We talked. A lot. And one thing led to another. She trailed off, unable to meet my gaze. The implication was clear. So you admit it, I said, my voice dangerously low. You admit that you've been having an affair with my best man? She nodded slowly, tears still streaming down her face. Yes, she whispered. But it was a mistake, Michael. It didn't mean anything. It was just a moment of weakness. A moment of weakness? I repeated, my voice rising in disbelief. On the eve of our wedding, with the man who was supposed to be standing by my side as my best friend. I turned to David, who was still standing silently beside Sarah, his face pale and contrite. And you, David, I said, my voice filled with a cold fury. My best friend, the man I trusted more than anyone else in the world. How could you do this to me? He finally found his voice, his words barely audible. Michael, I'm so sorry, he stammered. It just happened. I never meant for it to go this far. It just happened, I repeated, my voice incredulous. You just happened to sleep with my fiancée? Just happened to betray my trust in the most despicable way possible? I shook my head in disbelief, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. You know what the worst part is? I said, looking from Sarah to David. It's that you did it on our wedding day. The day that was supposed to be the start of our life together. You turned it into a complete and utter farce. I looked around at the stunned faces of our guests, our families, our friends. The joyous celebration had been replaced by a scene of devastation and heartbreak. Well, congratulations, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You've certainly given everyone something to remember. I took a deep breath, trying to regain some semblance of composure. I think it's time for everyone to go home, I announced, my voice ringing through the silent ballroom. The wedding is officially over. A stunned silence hung in the air for a moment longer. Then a flurry of hushed whispers broke out among the guests. My parents looked utterly devastated, their faces etched with a mixture of sadness and embarrassment. Sarah continued to sob, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably while David stood beside her, looking like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. Slowly, hesitantly, our guests began to move, the festive atmosphere completely shattered. Some offered awkward words of sympathy to me, while others simply slipped away, not knowing what to say or do. The catering staff looked confused, unsure of what to do with the trays of food and the overflowing champagne flutes. My father stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. Michael, are you sure about this? He asked again, his voice low and concerned. Maybe you should take some time to think things through before you make such a drastic decision. I looked at him, my heart aching for the pain I was causing him and my mother. Dad, I appreciate your concern, but my mind is made up, I said, my voice firm. I can't marry someone I can't trust. Not after this. He sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. All right, son, he said, his voice filled with resignation. Whatever you think is best. My mother hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her face. Oh, Michael, I'm so sorry, she whispered. This is just awful. I know, Mom, I said, hugging her back. But I'll be okay. We'll all be okay. As our guests continued to depart, I turned my attention back to Sarah and David, who was still standing in the middle of the ballroom, looking lost and bewildered. I think you two should leave, I said, my voice cold and devoid of emotion. This is my wedding reception, and you're no longer welcome here. Sarah looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hurt and anger. "But Michael..." "Just go, Sarah," I interrupted, my voice leaving no room for argument. "And take him with you." I gestured towards David with a dismissive wave of my hand. Without another word, Sarah turned and walked away, David trailing silently behind her. They disappeared through the grand entrance of the ballroom, leaving me standing alone amidst the wreckage of my wedding day. The catering staff began to clear the tables, the sounds of clinking glasses and hushed conversations filling the awkward silence. My parents stayed by my side, offering quiet support and understanding. "What do you want to do now, Michael?" my father asked gently. I looked around at the empty ballroom, the remnants of what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life scattered around me. The beautiful flowers, the elegant decorations, the half-eaten plates of food. It all felt like a cruel reminder of what could have been. "I don't know, Dad," I said, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. "I just want to go home." And so we did. My parents helped me gather my belongings, and we left the Majestic Hotel, the scene of so much joy and so much heartbreak, behind us. The drive home was silent. My parents didn't try to offer any platitudes or advice. They just sat there, their presence a comforting reassurance that I wasn't alone in this. When we arrived at my apartment, my father poured me a glass of scotch, and we sat in silence for a while, the weight of the day hanging heavy in the air. "So," my father finally said, breaking the silence, "what happens now?" I took a long sip of my scotch, the burning liquid a welcome distraction from the ache in my chest. "I don't know," I admitted. "I guess I'll have to figure that out." The next few days were a blur. I spent most of my time in my apartment trying to process what had happened. Friends and family called, offering their condolences and support. I appreciated their concern, but I didn't really feel like talking to anyone. The reality of what Sarah and David had done started to sink in, and the initial shock and anger began to give way to a deep, gnawing sadness. The future I had envisioned with Sarah, the life we had planned together, had been shattered in an instant. I thought about all the happy memories we had shared, the dreams we had made, the love I had felt for her. Was it all a lie? Had she never really loved me and David? The betrayal from my best friend cut even deeper. We had been through so much together. I had always considered him to be like a brother. How could he have done this to me? As the days passed, the sadness slowly began to morph back into anger. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been made a fool of, that they had both laughed at me behind my back. I knew I couldn't just let it go. I couldn't pretend that nothing had happened. They had hurt me deeply, and I felt a burning need for some kind of justice, some kind of retribution. The thought that had first flickered in my mind on my wedding night resurfaced, stronger and more insistent than ever. She cheated on me on our wedding day, but I would do something worse. I started to formulate a plan, a way to make them pay for what they had done. It wouldn't be easy, and it might even be a little crazy, but I was determined to go through with it. I knew it wouldn't bring back what I had lost, but maybe, just maybe, it would give me some sense of closure. And maybe, just maybe, it would teach them a lesson they would never forget. My plan started to take shape in the quiet solitude of my apartment. It wasn't a plan born out of rational thought, but rather from a deep-seated need to retaliate, to inflict the same kind of pain they had inflicted on me. The core of it was simple, almost childish in its vindictiveness. If they could betray me so publicly, I would return the favor, but on an even grander scale. The first step was to gather information. I spent hours scrolling through social media, looking at Sarah's and David's profiles, trying to piece together the timeline of their affair. I looked for any clues I might have missed, any subtle hints of their connection that I had been too blind to see. It was a painful process. Each picture, each comment, a fresh stab of hurt. But I needed to know the truth, the full extent of their betrayal. I also reached out to some mutual friends, subtly probing for information without revealing the full extent of my knowledge. I learned that Sarah and David had been spending a lot of time together in the weeks leading up to the wedding, supposedly just as friends supporting each other through their respective stressful times. Sarah with the wedding planning, and David with his recent breakup. The irony was not lost on me. As I gathered more pieces of the puzzle, my anger intensified. It wasn't just a fleeting moment of weakness, as Sarah had claimed. It was a calculated, ongoing deception that they had carefully concealed from me. Once I had a clearer picture of their relationship, I started to think about how I could expose them in a way that would cause them maximum damage. I considered several options, each more elaborate and potentially destructive than the last. I thought about confronting them publicly again, perhaps at a family gathering or a mutual friend's event. But that felt too small, too personal. I wanted their betrayal to be known by everyone, to follow them and haunt them for years to come. Then, I had an idea. It was audacious, risky, and potentially career-ending. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like the perfect way to exact my revenge. I work in marketing for a large corporation. Part of my job involves creating and managing social media campaigns. I had access to a vast network of contacts and a deep understanding of how to make something go viral online. My plan was to create a video, a short, emotionally charged narrative that would tell my side of the story. It would start with the seemingly perfect wedding day, the beautiful ceremony, the joyous reception. But then, it would reveal the shocking truth, the stolen glances, the hushed whispers, the undeniable evidence of Sarah's affair with David. The video would culminate in my public confrontation at the reception and my decision to call off the wedding. It would be raw, honest, and utterly devastating. And I would release it online for the world to see. I knew it was a drastic measure. It would undoubtedly cause a huge scandal and would likely have serious repercussions for everyone involved. But in that moment, consumed by anger and a thirst for revenge, I didn't care. They had destroyed my life. Now it was my turn to destroy theirs. I started working on the video immediately. I gathered all the photos and videos from the wedding that I could get my hands on. I spent hours editing them together, carefully crafting a narrative that would evoke sympathy for me and outrage towards Sarah and David. I also decided to include a personal message at the end of the video, speaking directly to Sarah and David, expressing my hurt and betrayal, and making it clear that I would never forgive them. As I worked on the video, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. It was as if I was finally taking control of the situation, turning my pain into power. I knew that releasing this video would be a point of no return, but I was past the point of caring about the consequences. Once the video was complete, I showed it to a few trusted friends, asking for their honest feedback. They were shocked by what had happened and by the raw emotion in the video. They warned me about the potential fallout, but they also understood my need for closure and revenge. With their encouragement, I decided to move forward with my plan. I set a date for the video release, a date that I knew would coincide with Sarah and David's planned honeymoon. I wanted them to be basking in their ill-gotten happiness when the truth came crashing down around them. The day before the planned release, I felt a surge of anxiety. Was I doing the right thing? Was I stooping to their level? Would this just make things worse? But then I thought about Sarah's tearful denials, David's pathetic excuses, and the humiliation I had felt on what was supposed to be my wedding day. The doubts vanished, replaced by a renewed sense of determination. I uploaded the video to a private server, scheduled it for release the following morning, and then turned off my computer trying to get some sleep. I knew that once the video went live, my life would never be the same. But as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction. They had made their choice. Now they would have to live with the consequences. The morning the video went live, I woke up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I knew that once it was out there would be no turning back. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. It was 8 a.m. The video was scheduled to be released at 9 a.m. I spent the next hour pacing around my apartment, my nerves on edge. I kept refreshing my social media feeds, half expecting to see the video already circulating, even though I knew it wasn't supposed to be public yet. Finally, the clock struck 9 a.m. I took a deep breath and opened my laptop. I navigated to the private server where I'd uploaded the video and changed the privacy settings to public. It was done. The video was out there. I closed my laptop and sat down on the couch, my heart pounding in my chest. I had no idea what to expect. Would anyone even see the video? Would it have the impact I was hoping for? I didn't have to wait long to find out. Within minutes, my phone started buzzing with notifications. Friends were texting me, asking if I had seen the video that was going viral. My social media feeds were flooded with shares and comments. The video had hit a nerve. People were outraged by Sarah's and David's betrayal and sympathetic to my situation. The comment section was filled with messages of support and condemnation for the two of them. As the day went on, the video continued to spread like wildfire. It was picked up by news outlets and blogs, and soon my story was being shared around the world. I watched the online reaction with a mixture of satisfaction and unease. On one hand, I was glad that the truth was out there, that Sarah and David were facing the consequences of their actions. On the other hand, I felt a sense of guilt and discomfort at the public spectacle I had created. My phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was filled with concern. "Michael, have you seen what's happening online?" "Yes, Mom," I said, "I know." "Are you sure this was the right thing to do?" she asked gently. "This is getting so big." "I don't know, Mom," I admitted. "But I felt like I had to do something. They hurt me so badly." "I know, honey," she said. "But I just worry about you and about them." I understood her concern. I knew that the video was going to have a devastating impact on Sarah and David's lives. Their reputations would be tarnished, their relationships with family and friends strained, their careers potentially affected. But a part of me felt like they deserved it. They had made their choices and now they had to face the consequences. Later that day, I received a frantic phone call from Sarah. Her voice was choked with tears and anger. "Michael, how could you do this to me?" she sobbed. "You've ruined my life. You ruined our wedding day, Sarah," I retorted, my voice cold. "And you did it with my best friend. What did you expect?" "It was a mistake," she pleaded. "Please just take the video down. You're destroying me." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to betray me," I said again, the words feeling hollow and rehearsed. I hung up the phone. Over the next few days, the fallout from the video continued. Sarah and David were bombarded with messages of hate and condemnation. Their social media accounts were flooded with negative comments. Some of our mutual friends took sides, while others tried to stay neutral. I watched it all unfold from the relative safety of my apartment, feeling a strange mix of emotions. There was a sense of satisfaction that my revenge had been so effective. But there was also a deep sadness and a growing unease. Was this really what I wanted? Had I gone too far? Was I becoming the kind of person I never wanted to be? The initial rush of anger and vindication began to fade, replaced by a hollow emptiness. I had achieved my goal. I had made them pay for what they had done. But it hadn't brought me any real happiness or closure. I realized that revenge, while it might offer a temporary sense of satisfaction, ultimately leaves you feeling empty and unfulfilled. It doesn't heal the pain. It just perpetuates the cycle of hurt. As the days turned into weeks, the intensity of the online storm began to die down. The video was still out there, a permanent reminder of what had happened, but the initial shock and outrage had subsided. I started to venture out of my apartment again, slowly trying to piece my life back together. It wasn't easy. The pain of Sarah's betrayal and David's treachery was still raw, but I knew I couldn't let it consume me. I started focusing on my work again, throwing myself into projects and deadlines. I reconnected with friends who had offered their support. I even started seeing a therapist to help me process my emotions and move forward. It was a long and difficult journey, but slowly, gradually, I began to heal. I knew I would never forget what Sarah and David had done, but I also knew that I couldn't let their actions define the rest of my life. I had done something worse than Sarah cheating on our wedding day. I had sought revenge in a way that had caused widespread pain and humiliation. And while a part of me still felt justified in my actions, another part of me regretted the damage I had caused. In the end, I learned a valuable lesson about the destructive nature of revenge. It's a powerful emotion that can drive you to do things you might later regret. Sometimes, the best way to heal is not to seek retribution, but to forgive and move on. I don't know if I will ever truly forgive Sarah and David, but I hope that one day I will be able to look back on this painful chapter of my life without bitterness or anger. I hope that I will be able to learn from my mistakes and build a future filled with genuine happiness and trust. And I hope that I will never again let the desire for revenge cloud my judgment and lead me down a path of destruction. As the months drifted by, the initial shockwaves of the video began to recede, leaving behind a landscape scarred by broken trust and fractured relationships. My life slowly started to find a new rhythm, one that didn't revolve around wedding plans or shared dreams with Sarah. The silence in my apartment, once heavy with the absence of what was supposed to be, gradually transformed into a quiet space for healing and self-reflection. The therapy sessions proved to be more helpful than I initially anticipated. Dr. Evans was a patient and insightful listener, guiding me through the complex web of emotions I had been grappling with. He helped me understand the roots of my anger and the underlying pain of betrayal. He didn't condone my actions, but he helped me see them as a reaction to a deeply hurtful situation. One of the key things Dr. Evans emphasized was the importance of forgiveness, not necessarily for Sarah and David, but for myself. Holding on to resentment and anger was like carrying a heavy burden, he explained, and it would only hinder my ability to move forward. It was a difficult concept to grasp, especially in the aftermath of such a public and painful humiliation. But I started to consider it, the idea of releasing the bitterness that had taken root in my heart. My interactions with Sarah and David became non-existent. They had effectively vanished from my life. And while there were times when I wondered how they were doing, I made a conscious effort not to seek them out or dwell on their current circumstances. The online world, once a battleground for our personal drama, gradually faded into the background. The comments and messages eventually slowed to a trickle, and the video, while still accessible, no longer dominated my every thought. I focused on rebuilding the relationships that had been strained by the scandal. My parents remained a constant source of love and support, and we grew even closer during this difficult time. I also made an effort to reconnect with friends who had been caught in the middle of the conflict, trying to mend any fences that had been broken. It wasn't always easy, and some friendships had inevitably changed. But I was grateful for the ones that endured. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into my projects with renewed focus, finding a sense of purpose and accomplishment in my professional life. My colleagues were supportive and understanding, and I found comfort in the routine and challenges of my job. As time passed, the sharp edges of my pain began to soften. The memories of Sarah and our wedding day still surfaced occasionally, but they no longer triggered the same intense wave of anger and hurt. I started to remember the good times we had shared, the love I had once felt for her, without the immediate overlay of betrayal. It was a sign of healing, a gradual acceptance of what had been and what would never be. One day, months after the video had been released, I received an unexpected email. It was from Sarah. My first instinct was to delete it unread, but something compelled me to open it. The email was brief and to the point. She apologized for the pain she had caused me, acknowledging the depth of her betrayal and the public humiliation I had endured. She didn't offer any excuses or try to minimize her actions. She simply expressed her remorse and wished me well for the future. I stared at the email for a long time, a mix of emotions swirling within me. Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind her of the pain she had inflicted. But another part of me felt a sense of weary resignation. What was the point? What good would come of reopening old wounds? I decided to reply with a short email of my own. I acknowledged her apology and said that I hoped she and David were doing well. It was a simple, almost impersonal response, but it felt like the right way to close that chapter of my life. Life moved on. I started dating again, cautiously at first, but eventually finding genuine connections with new people. The experience with Sarah had made me more wary, perhaps a little more guarded, but it had also taught me valuable lessons about trust, communication, and the importance of knowing yourself. Years passed. I built a good life for myself, filled with meaningful relationships, a fulfilling career, and a sense of inner peace. The memory of my disastrous wedding day faded into the background, becoming a story I occasionally recounted, not with bitterness, but with a sense of perspective and resilience. I never saw Sarah or David again. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they had eventually married, but their relationship was rumored to be tumultuous. I didn't dwell on it. Their lives were no longer my concern. Looking back, I still grappled with the decision to release the video. While it had brought me a sense of immediate satisfaction and had exposed their betrayal to the world, it had also caused a great deal of pain and collateral damage. Perhaps there were other ways I could have handled the situation, less public and less destructive, but ultimately, I came to accept it as a part of my journey. It was a reaction born out of intense pain and anger, a desperate attempt to regain control in a situation where I felt powerless. I had learned from it, grown from it, and emerged from the experience a stronger, more resilient person. The something worse I had done on my wedding day had a lasting impact, not just on Sarah and David, but on myself as well. It taught me the complexities of human emotions, the destructive power of betrayal, and the long and arduous path to forgiveness and healing. And while I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone, it ultimately shaped me into the person I am today. The passage of time, a relentless current, continued to smooth the jagged edges of that tumultuous period in my life. The viral storm I had unleashed eventually subsided, becoming a muted echo in the vast expanse of the internet. My name, once associated with scandal and public heartbreak, gradually faded from the trending topics and news headlines. Life, as it always does, found a way to move forward. My professional life flourished. The initial concerns about the video's impact on my career proved to be largely unfounded. In fact, the raw honesty and emotional vulnerability I had displayed resonated with some people, and I even received unexpected opportunities as a result. I channeled my energy into my work, finding a sense of stability and accomplishment in the familiar routines and new challenges. My personal life also began to blossom. I continued to date, learning from each experience, becoming more attuned to my own needs and desires in a relationship. There were moments of hesitation, a lingering fear of vulnerability after the profound betrayal I had experienced. But with time and conscious effort, I started to trust again, to open myself up to the possibility of genuine connection. Several years after the wedding that wasn't, I met someone special. Her name was Emily, and she was everything Sarah wasn't. Grounded, honest, and fiercely independent. We met through a mutual friend, and from our very first conversation, I felt a sense of ease and understanding that I hadn't experienced before. Emily knew about my past, The story of my disastrous wedding and the viral video was, by then, a well-known anecdote in certain circles. But she didn't judge me for it. Instead, she listened with empathy and compassion, acknowledging the pain I had gone through without dwelling on the sensational aspects of the story. With Emily, I felt safe to be myself, flaws and all. We built our relationship on a foundation of open communication, mutual respect, and unwavering trust. She helped me heal the remaining scars from my past, not by pretending they didn't exist, but by showing me what a healthy and loving partnership could truly be. We dated for a few years before getting engaged. This time, the proposal was quiet and intimate, a far cry from the elaborate spectacle of my first engagement. And when we planned our wedding, it was a small, personal affair, surrounded by our closest friends and family, a celebration of our genuine love and commitment. On my wedding day with Emily, as I stood at the altar waiting for her to walk down the aisle, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. The pain of the past was still a part of my story, but it no longer defined me. I had learned from it, grown from it, and found happiness again in a way that felt authentic and lasting. As Emily walked towards me, radiant in her simple white dress, a wave of gratitude washed over me. I was grateful for the lessons I had learned, even the painful ones. I was grateful for the love and support of my family and friends. And most of all, I was grateful for Emily, the woman who had shown me that true love was possible, even after heartbreak. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with heartfelt vows and genuine emotion. The reception was a joyous celebration, a testament to the love that Emily and I shared. There were no lingering shadows of the past, no awkward glances or hushed whispers, just pure, unadulterated happiness. Later that evening, as Emily and I danced our first dance as husband and wife, I thought about Sarah and David. I wondered if they ever thought about me, about the choices they had made, about the ripple effect of their betrayal. I didn't feel any anger or bitterness towards them anymore, just a quiet sense of closure. I had done something worse than Sarah cheating on our wedding day. I had sought revenge in a way that had been both public and painful. But ultimately, that act had led me down a path of self-reflection and healing, and eventually to a place of genuine happiness. Life has a funny way of working out. Sometimes the most painful experiences can lead to the greatest growth, and sometimes the things we think will destroy us end up making us stronger. As I held Emily close, swaying to the music, I knew that I had finally found my happy ending. It wasn't the ending I had envisioned years ago, but it was so much better, so much more real. And in that moment, I wouldn't have traded it for anything in the world. The scars of the past were still there, a reminder of the pain I had endured, but they no longer defined me. I had moved on. I had healed, and I had found love again. And that, I realized, was the best revenge of all. Years continued their steady march, each one adding layers of experience and perspective to the tapestry of my life. My marriage with Emily blossomed, growing deeper and more fulfilling with each passing season. We built a life together filled with laughter, shared adventures, and the quiet comfort of knowing we had each other's unwavering support. The ghost of my first wedding day became a distant memory, a faded photograph in the album of my past. Emily and I eventually started a family. The joy of holding our first child in our arms was an experience that transcended any pain I had ever felt. Fatherhood brought a new dimension to my life, a profound sense of purpose and unconditional love that I hadn't known existed. We went on to have 2 more children, filling our home with the delightful chaos and boundless energy of young life. As the years passed, I occasionally thought about Sarah and David, wondering what had become of them. The initial wave of online scrutiny surrounding their affair had long since dissipated, and they had retreated from the public eye. Rumors circulated through our old social circles: a difficult marriage, career setbacks, a quiet life away from the city. But these were just whispers, and I never sought to confirm them. Their lives were separate from mine, and I had no desire to revisit that painful chapter of my past. One day, a chance encounter brought Sarah back into my orbit, albeit indirectly. I was attending a charity gala with Emily, a formal event filled with familiar faces from our professional and social circles. As we mingled with the crowd, I noticed a woman across the room who looked vaguely familiar. It took me a moment, but I eventually recognized her. It was Sarah. She looked different. The vibrant, almost manic energy I remembered from our engagement was gone, replaced by a more subdued and weary demeanor. She was standing alone, nursing a drink, and seemed to be deliberately avoiding eye contact with others. For a moment, a wave of conflicting emotions washed over me: surprise, a flicker of the old hurt, and a strange sense of pity. I considered going over to say hello, to acknowledge her presence, but Emily gently placed a hand on my arm, her eyes asking a silent question. I shook my head slightly. There was nothing left to say. Our paths had diverged irrevocably, and there was no point in trying to bridge the chasm that lay between us. We moved on, engaging in conversation with other guests, and I didn't look back. The encounter, though brief, served as a reminder of the life I had once envisioned, and how drastically different my reality had become. And as I looked at Emily, radiant and happy by my side, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the way things had ultimately turned out. Years turned into decades. My children grew up, started their own lives, and eventually gave Emily and me the joy of becoming grandparents. My career continued to be fulfilling, and Emily and I built a comfortable and happy life together. The memory of my first wedding day became a story I rarely told, a footnote in the larger narrative of my life. Looking back on that tumultuous time, I had come to a more nuanced understanding of my own actions. While I still believed that Sarah and David's betrayal was deeply hurtful and unforgivable, I also recognized that my decision to publicly expose them through the video had been driven by a desire for revenge that had ultimately caused more pain than it had healed. The something worse I had done on my wedding day had a lasting impact, not just on Sarah and David, but on my own conscience as well. It had been a rash and impulsive act, fueled by anger and a desire for retribution. While it had brought me a temporary sense of satisfaction, it had also created a ripple effect of negativity that had touched many lives. Over time, I had learned the importance of forgiveness, not just for others, but for myself. I had come to accept that I had made mistakes, that I had reacted in a way that I might not choose again. But I had also learned from those mistakes, and they had ultimately contributed to the person I had become. The story of my first wedding day, the betrayal, and the viral video became a cautionary tale I sometimes shared with my children as they navigated the complexities of relationships and heartbreak. I emphasized the importance of integrity, the devastating consequences of infidelity, and the corrosive nature of revenge. I encouraged them to choose empathy and forgiveness over anger and retribution, even in the face of profound hurt. As I entered my later years, surrounded by my loving family, I looked back on my life with a sense of peace and contentment. The pain of the past had faded, replaced by the warmth of enduring love and the joy of a life well lived. I had learned that true happiness doesn't come from seeking revenge or holding on to bitterness, but from embracing forgiveness, building meaningful connections, and finding peace within yourself. And that, I realized, was the most valuable lesson of all. The passage of time, like a skilled artisan, had meticulously smoothed the rough edges of my memories, softening the sharp contours of pain and betrayal. The viral storm I had unleashed in my youthful fury had long since dissipated, leaving behind a quiet understanding of the complexities of human nature and the enduring power of resilience. My life with Emily continued to be a source of immense joy and unwavering support, a testament to the possibility of finding true love after heartbreak. Our children had grown into remarkable individuals, each carving their own unique paths in the world. They had witnessed the story of my first wedding, not as a scandalous headline, but as a personal narrative of pain, anger, and eventual healing. We had open and honest conversations about the importance of integrity in relationships, the devastating consequences of infidelity, and the long journey towards forgiveness. I had shared my regrets about the public nature of my revenge, emphasizing the importance of choosing empathy and understanding, even in the face of profound hurt. As grandparents, Emily and I found a new kind of joy in watching our grandchildren grow and discover the world. Their innocent laughter and boundless curiosity filled our home with a warmth that chased away any lingering shadows of the past. Time, it seemed, had a way of putting things into perspective, of highlighting what truly mattered in life: love, family, and the simple moments of connection. Years turned into decades, and the memory of Sarah and David became increasingly distant. Occasionally, their names would surface in conversations with old acquaintances, usually accompanied by a brief update on their lives, a quiet retirement, a move to a different state, the usual milestones of life. I would listen politely, offering no judgment or commentary. Their story was no longer a part of mine. One crisp autumn afternoon, while Emily and I were visiting our eldest daughter, Sarah's name came up in a way I hadn't expected. Our daughter, a therapist, mentioned a new client she had been seeing, a woman struggling with the aftermath of a past infidelity. As she described the woman's story, a sense of unease settled over me. The details were vague, but something felt familiar. Later that evening, after our grandchildren had been tucked into bed, I asked my daughter more about her client. She hesitated at first, respecting the confidentiality of her work, but eventually she shared a few more details. The woman's name was Sarah. A wave of unexpected emotions washed over me. Surprise, a faint echo of the old hurt, and a profound sense of sadness. I didn't ask for more details, but the realization that Sarah was now seeking help for the pain of her past was strangely affecting. It was a reminder that everyone, regardless of their mistakes, carries their own burdens and seeks their own path to healing. I didn't feel any sense of vindication or satisfaction. Instead, I felt a quiet sense of empathy. We had both been through a painful experience, and while our roles in that drama had been different, we had both suffered in our own ways. The encounter with Sarah's name, even indirectly, prompted a period of reflection. I thought about the young, heartbroken man I had been, consumed by anger and a thirst for revenge. I thought about the rash decision to release that video, the immediate satisfaction it had brought, and the lingering regret that had followed. Over the years, I had come to believe that true strength lies not in seeking retribution, but in choosing forgiveness. It's a difficult path, one that requires letting go of anger and resentment, but it ultimately leads to greater peace and healing. I had forgiven Sarah and David, not for their sake, but for my own. I had released the bitterness that had once consumed me, allowing myself to move forward and build a life filled with love and happiness. As I sat by the fireplace with Emily that evening, the warmth of the flames mirroring the warmth in my heart, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. I was grateful for the lessons I had learned, for the love I had found, and for the life we had built together. The something worse I had done on my wedding day had been a turning point, a catalyst for change that had ultimately led me to a better place. Life, I had come to realize, is not about holding on to past hurts or seeking revenge. It's about embracing the present, cherishing the connections we have, and finding peace within ourselves. And as I looked at Emily, my partner, my love, my life, I knew that I had finally found that peace. The journey had been long and arduous, but I had arrived at a place of contentment, a place where the scars of the past served not as reminders of pain, but as testaments to the enduring power of the human spirit to heal and to love again. The twilight years of my life unfolded with a gentle serenity, like the slow, graceful descent of the sun below the horizon. Emily and I found immense joy in the simple rhythms of our days: leisurely walks in the garden, quiet evenings spent reading by the fire, and the frequent visits from our ever-growing family. The echoes of my tumultuous past had softened into a quiet hum, a reminder of the storms I had weathered and the strength I had found within myself. Our grandchildren, now teenagers and young adults, would occasionally ask about the great wedding story, a tale that had become a part of our family lore, recounted with a mix of humor and poignant reflection. I would share the narrative of heartbreak and anger, but always with a focus on the lessons learned about forgiveness, resilience, and the importance of choosing love over hate. I never demonized Sarah or David in these retellings, emphasizing that everyone makes mistakes and that true growth comes from learning from those errors. One spring morning, as I was tending to my rose bushes, I received a letter. It was handwritten, the familiar cursive triggering a faint memory. It was from Sarah. It had been decades since our last indirect encounter through my daughter. The letter was simple and heartfelt. She wrote about her life, her own journey of healing and self-discovery. She mentioned her marriage to David had eventually ended, a casualty of the unresolved issues and the shadow of their past actions. She wrote about the challenges she had faced, the mistakes she had made, and the long road she had traveled towards finding a measure of peace. Most importantly, she expressed her sincere and profound remorse for the pain she had caused me all those years ago. She acknowledged the magnitude of her betrayal and the public humiliation I had endured. She didn't ask for forgiveness, but she hoped that I had found happiness in my life. Reading her words, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't realized I still needed. The anger I had once harbored had long since faded, replaced by a quiet understanding of the shared human experience of love, loss, and the search for meaning. I thought about the young woman I had loved, the dreams we had shared, and the devastating way those dreams had been shattered. I felt a pang of sadness for the pain we had both endured. I didn't feel the need to respond to her letter immediately. I sat with her words for a few days, allowing myself to fully process the emotions they evoked. Eventually, I wrote a short reply. I thanked her for her letter and acknowledged her journey. I told her that I had indeed found happiness and wished her well in her own life. It was a simple exchange, but it felt like a final letting go, a peaceful resolution to a chapter that had once been filled with so much turmoil. Life continued its gentle flow. Emily and I celebrated our golden wedding anniversary, surrounded by our children and grandchildren, a testament to the enduring power of our love. Looking back over the decades, I realized that the painful experience of my first wedding had, in a strange way, shaped the course of my life, leading me down a path I never would have imagined, but one that had ultimately brought me immeasurable happiness. The something worse I had done on my wedding day, the act of public revenge, remained a part of my story, a reminder of the impulsive decisions we make in moments of intense emotion. But it no longer defined me. I had learned from my mistakes, embraced forgiveness, and built a life filled with love, family, and a profound sense of peace. As I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, Emily by my side, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The storms of my youth had long since passed, leaving behind a landscape of quiet beauty and enduring love. And in that moment, I knew that I had truly found my happily ever after. The journey had been long and winding, filled with unexpected twists and turns. but I had arrived at a place of profound peace and gratitude. The lessons learned from the ashes of my first wedding had shaped me into the man I was today. A man who had found love again, built a beautiful family, and learned the true meaning of forgiveness and resilience. The final pages of my life story were written with the soft strokes of time, each day a gentle reminder of the preciousness of the present moment. Emily and I continued to cherish our days together, finding joy in the simple pleasures of companionship and the enduring love that had deepened over half a century. Our family remained our greatest treasure, the laughter of our grandchildren a constant melody in our home. The memory of my first wedding, once a source of pain and anger, had transformed into a distant anecdote, a story I could recount without bitterness, a testament to the resilience of the human heart. The something worse I had done in my youthful rage was a reminder of the impulsive nature of anger, but also of the possibility of learning and growing from our mistakes. My correspondence with Sarah had been brief, but meaningful, a final closing of a long-ago chapter. It brought a sense of quiet resolution, a mutual acknowledgement of the pain we had both endured and the separate paths we had chosen. There were no lingering resentments, no unspoken words left hanging in the air. Just a peaceful understanding of the past and a quiet hope for the future. However much time remained. As the years advanced, my physical strength began to wane, but my spirit remained vibrant, fueled by the love of my family and the gratitude for a life well lived. Emily and I held hands through it all, our bond unwavering, our love a constant source of comfort and strength. In the final days, surrounded by my children and grandchildren, I felt a profound sense of peace. There were no regrets, no unfinished business. I had loved deeply, I had learned from my mistakes, and I had found happiness again in a way that was both unexpected and deeply fulfilling. As I closed my eyes for the last time, I carried with me the warmth of Emily's hand in mine, the echoes of my grandchildren's laughter, and the quiet understanding that life, with all its joys and sorrows, had been a precious gift. The story of the wedding that never was had become a part of my legacy, a reminder that even from the ashes of heartbreak, new beginnings are possible, and that forgiveness and love are the ultimate keys to a life well lived. The something worse I had done had ultimately paved the way for a deeper understanding of myself and the world, leading me to a place of lasting peace and contentment.